Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar where we feature corporate speakers in order to help you develop your IP and startups with corporate strategic alliances. And we're featuring today Eli Lilly and Company to talk about their technology and partnership needs. Before we begin, we'd like to let you know that this webinar is put together in order to highlight the technology and IP needs of the different corporates participating in the Corporate Selection Committee. So our demo day is on October 16 and 17. And doing this webinar, we'd like to encourage everyone to listen to what Eli Lilly has to say and what Eli Lilly needs in order to guide you when you submit your startups for the University Startups Demo Day on October 16 to 17, as well as when you submit IP or technologies for the IP book. Both startups and IP that are submitted to us will be scored by the Corporate Selection Committee. And we'll talk to you a little bit more about that later. But before we begin, I have a couple of housekeeping reminders here. So you can ask questions at the end of the session, and we'll handle Q&A through the GoToWebinar chat box. So all you need to do is type in your questions on the GoToWebinar control panel on the right side of your screen, and your questions will be queued. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can today, and hopefully you have some very interesting questions for our speaker to ask to answer today. This webinar is being recorded, so we have slides and video available to you 24 to 48 hours after the webinar concludes. Now, this is particularly useful for your colleagues, especially if you work in a university. You can get your researchers, your students, your faculty to watch this webinar, especially if they're interested in submitting their technology or their startups for the University Startups Demo Day. And if you are interested in listening or watching past webinars, especially about the Demo Day and the IP to Startup program, just subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can watch all the videos we've done in the past or all the webinars we've done in the past. And you can also get updates on new uploads we have every week. Again, we'd like to encourage everyone to submit your startups and your IP or technologies for the Demo Day. The first deadline is on July 14th. And for startups that get selected, you will be given a presentation slot as well as access to Fortune 500 and Global 1000 corporate venture capitalists, open innovation people, as well as VCs and angels. And for those who are submitting IP, you will be provided feedback and scoring of your technology for market alignment and relevance to industry, as well as be featured in the IP book. Now, for both startups and IP, our corporate selection committee will be reviewing and scoring your applications. So we do encourage the universities and companies or researchers on the line to consider submitting to the demo day this year. All right. And we do encourage everyone to submit early, of course. That will give us enough time to review thoroughly your application as well as screen it for errors or mistakes that will allow us also to get back to you if you submit early, if we find anything that you need to improve in your submission. All right. So with that in mind, I'd like to introduce today's speaker. So our speaker today has been part of our corporate selection committee for the University Startups Demo Day. He's been around for a couple of cycles, and he has found very interesting companies from the universities that submitted to us. So he's a senior director of LRL Due Diligence, and he's from Eli Lilly and Company. And I'd like to present to you Dr. Michael Myers. Mike, turn it over to you now.
Hello, can you hear me all right, Ria?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, very good. So first of all, I'd like to thank everyone for joining today and frankly for all the work, hard sweat equity that you're putting into your innovation, your partnerships, all really working to hopefully deliver new innovation to patients. Maybe just a few words, background on myself. I'm actually a trained organic chemist. I worked as a medicinal chemist across a number of therapeutic areas for about 18 years before I moved to project management role at Lilly and subsequently to my current role, which is essentially working with the external innovation team of experts to essentially conduct diligence, scientific and technical diligence on opportunities for either in-licensing or, in fact, acquisition that kind of reach the material threshold that requires a large assessment, such as would normally be done. My team also supports diligence on Lilly assets. So if there's an opportunity to outpartner a molecule that could be, in fact, useful for purposes outside of Lilly's strategy, my team also contributes to that. Now, as part of my greater responsibilities, being part of the external innovation team, I have been working with the NCET2 as well as Lilly's academic engagement strategy to better define roles and processes across the organization as to how we engage what are now becoming just incredibly complex ecosystems. So that's kind of the background for me and kind of why I'm involved at all in NCET2. And perhaps we can move to the next slide and get to the rest of the deck, Ria. The next slide is, of course, just a simple disclaimer. Certainly available, I think, at the end of this webinar to answer any questions. This is not necessarily a pitch for Lilly products, but necessarily I was asked by Ria and her colleagues at the NCET2 to describe a little bit about how companies like ours approach engaging collaborators or potential collaborators, how we, in fact, resource new innovation that could help us deliver products. So that's what I'm going to be focused on today. Ria, if we could go to the next slide. And I just want to reiterate a couple of things on this quite straightforward, simple slide. Our scientists, our development engine, our commercial teams are really working to try and deliver medicines and innovative solutions to patients. Ultimately, the breadth of unmet medical need with respect to medications is huge. And the path to actually deliver that is a huge undertaking, both with resources but also capabilities. So our mission really is based on integrity, delivering packages that really support the use of the innovation in the market and respect for people. So these are kind of the baseline mission statements, vision, and Lilly values that you would hopefully see when you come to meet any of our colleagues. Ria, if we could go to the next slide. Now, Lilly is one of the few companies left in our industry that have not necessarily had a merger with equals or, in fact, been taken over. So the company goes way back to the founding by Colonel Eli Lilly. He was a Civil War veteran back in 1876. And over the years, Lilly really had a number of remarkable statements that he captured. And in fact, a good deal of Lilly quality and integrity culture is related to really the historical founders. The grandson, in particular, got educated in the sciences and, in fact, captured this statement that research is the heart of the business and the soul of the enterprise. And Lilly, unlike some other large pharma companies, continue to invest at incredible benchmark levels of R&D investment in our future portfolio. This year, I think Lilly is spending nearly 20% of its income on R&D, unlike a number of other companies. That's about equivalent to $5 billion in real dollars this year. If we could go to the next slide, Ria. So going way back, in fact, to the 20s, Lilly was known to have in-licensed the rights to insulin. This was a major breakthrough discovery at the University of Toronto, and Lilly developed essentially a process to purify, isolate, and deliver an incredibly complex and sensitive protein to the market. The innovators of this discovery ended up winning the Nobel Prize in quite short order. The disease itself is type 1 diabetes, and at the time, for children that were found to have this unfortunate disease, the basic solution was essentially a starvation diet. As children, they ate, they'd in fact suffer the consequences of that disease a lot earlier, and so ultimately to prolong their life, the existence and the solution was really to just live off of a starvation type diet. So it was truly groundbreaking when this innovation was delivered to patients. Really changed, of course, the whole outcome of that disease. Lilly remains very much committed to diabetes research, and we have certainly some huge commitments and partnerships in this area. Several years back, we started thinking a little bit differently and about how do we engage and very consistently keep up with all the innovation going on across the planet. It turns out, if you look at all of the FDA-approved drugs from 2008 to 2016, there were 276 new molecular entity and new biological entities that were delivered to the market over that period of time. It turns out about 80% of that innovation was not invented by the company that ended up getting it approved. So clearly, the world has changed from a situation where innovation was discovered, developed, and carried over the finish line by a company like ours. Given the need for biomarkers, diagnostics, and other enabling technologies, it becomes an incredibly complex web of innovation that needs to be managed in an efficient manner. So ultimately, Lilly has for a long time not believed that all the targets and molecules that could provide innovative solutions to patients come from our own laboratories. We do certainly have a great variety of capabilities, but in some new technology platforms or perhaps disruptive technologies, we're less capable to run those kinds of activities on our own. So ultimately, the acquisition of targets, molecules, capabilities, and technologies can come from anywhere. And ultimately, by integrating our own capabilities, the capabilities of a partner, molecules that are invented by others, or our own molecules, can shape essentially new treatments and deliver solutions to patients. So I'm going to talk a little bit about shaping. And in fact, some of this exercise involved with NCET2 in looking at very early technologies, which some of you are certainly representing yourselves. Ultimately, you have limited resources. You may not need access to resources like Lilly's at this point in your kind of exploration, but ultimately, through more efficient collaboration, it would be our intent to provide actionable kinds of feedback along the way to make sure that you have a good understanding of what companies like ours are looking for, to be clearer with what kinds of innovation is going to matter and be commercially important in the future, given all of the pressures on our healthcare system. So I'm going to come back to some of these perspectives later, but Rhea, if we could move to the next slide. So this slide's a little bit complex. There's a lot of detail here, and I'm just going to go a little bit around the wheel. Like any other company in pharma, there's always an eye to the outside via in-license or acquisition. That, in fact, really takes up a good bit of my own day. And to actually deliver innovation, whether it's a collaboration or partnership with academics in a discovery sense, or with other key strategic partners in a development sense, or with other strategic geographical partners, for example, in a commercial sense, it takes a lot of partnership to effectively deliver innovation to the planet today. Lilly also has a venture capital strategy. I'm going to talk a little bit about that on the next slide. A number of companies like Lilly also have corporate venture arms, and indeed Lilly has a standalone corporate venture arm, both here in the States, based in the States, as well as in Asia. So we're very active in helping to create companies. Again, back to the shaping process, there are some early, maybe disruptive innovation areas of peripheral therapeutic area interest for Lilly right now that we'd like to influence in development. So our venture capital strategy is quite advanced and mature, perhaps relative to other companies. There are hundreds of ongoing university collaborations, most of which you'll never see advertised in print. Given the materiality, given the types of partnerships, we may be working to solve really focused problems, either on specific gene knockout animals, assays, target validation, biomarker evolution, et cetera. So there's engagement across the entire value chain with universities. Well, also has been known for our approach to open innovation, and in particular, we started an OIDD initiative several years back. There are well over 300 academic institutions and biotechs, frankly, involved in this open innovation drug discovery collaboration. It's quite unique in terms of sourcing either molecules or sourcing biology innovation assays that have been validated. There's also, in fact, an in silico component where assays and tools are provided to academic institutes that want to engage and, in fact, design potential solutions against targets that could be of interest to Lilly. The next slide is going to be about the capital funds portfolio. It is a special subset of venture capital strategy, but I'm going to move on to perhaps something a little bit closer, to an example of a model that Lilly has stood up now. It's been operating for several years. Back to the earlier slide where we discussed people's innovation, people's capabilities, people's funds. Lilly has some skin in the game on every aspect of this story. So Lilly is a strategic investment partner with a number of VCs. We've stood up over the years a large amount of money, wherein Lilly has essentially deployed a limited percentage of those funds. With that strategic partner, we've identified innovation either from our own portfolio or from other large pharma or, in fact, other biotech that we felt would be of interest to, in fact, carry out a proof of concept or proof of principle human clinical study. Each one of these initiatives then is essentially creating a company. We call it a project-focused company. There are literally no employees. There's an agreement, though, between the venture capital fund and somebody from that VC qualified to run essentially a virtual company is involved in essentially executing the work through a series of partnerships with contract manufacturing organizations, contract research organizations that do the preclinical kind of testing, or clinical research organizations that do the clinical testing. Now, one additional dimension you'll see here in the corner, there's Chorus. This is actually a Lilly kind of entity that exists within our walls. This group is set aside. It's an experienced set of drug hunter, drug developers. There's about 35 employees. And Chorus typically runs a portfolio of up to 15 molecules that are at any stage between kind of candidate selection and GLP enabling kind of toxicology to the end of the proof of concept. So you think about an average biotech company, it might be 15 to 30 people typically doing all the work it takes to develop one, possibly two assets. This is a very different kind of entity, all set up to carry out a book of work on one of these PFCs and carry it out to whatever outcome is sought in terms of the particular proof of concept study. It's really a truth-seeking kind of enterprise. There's no more money to be made by Chorus employees if they have a positive outcome or a negative outcome. There's actually a great article written just a few years ago, captured in Nature Reviews Drug Discovery on the Chorus story. It's a little bit of an old snapshot, but frankly gives you some insight as to how Lilly is set up for partnering perhaps in different ways than you all may be currently experiencing or currently thinking about. So Ria, could we move to the next slide? How do you contact Lilly if you think there's innovation of our interest? Now, Ria, earlier there was a hyperlink to our Advancing Innovation Lilly.com site. Wondering if you could actually go back to your Explorer version and pull that up again. Those of you might be wondering, what is it of Lilly's interest? There are certainly things that change over time, and so Lilly trends to try and keep this area as up to date as possible. And if, in fact, you scroll down a little bit, Ria, you'll see there are a number of areas of Lilly's focus. Our main therapeutic areas are listed right at the top, but we're not just interested in molecules. There's other kinds of innovation. Lilly even has a wholly owned enterprise called Elanco. This is our animal health business. A lot of, I would say, partnering between Lilly and our animal health colleagues. And so you can see from this pick list then what are the kinds of innovation that are really frontline things that we're looking for. If your innovation is not necessarily seen, or you have something that's really quite disruptive in one of these areas and a new target that's not well known, you can still reach out and contact Lilly. And by engaging this portal, you can give us just enough non-confidential information so that the opportunity gets directed to the appropriate search and evaluate expert that would be in the best position to assess that opportunity relative to Lilly's interests. So that link is on a number of the slides. You're welcome to browse that. That'll give you some more kind of proximal interest. I would encourage you, if this is you're working in an area that's not of direct interest right now to Lilly, most other peer companies offer a similar approach for you to scan what are their current strengths, where are they commercially strong, where are their future areas of focus that may not be a commercial strength for that particular company. So there's a number of ways to go about it, but certainly I think what you should expect if you engage a Lilly search and evaluate person is a fair assessment of your opportunity, and depending on the amount of information provided, our colleagues should be providing you back some information that you could use to shape how you're thinking about that innovation. So I think that's all I really wanted to cover, Ria. I think I'm a little bit over on time, but I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you, Mike. We're queuing up some questions from the audience right now, but before we go there, I'd like to again, I'd like to reiterate or to reinforce what Mike said earlier, that the University Startups Demo Day. He's part of the selection committee. He'll be looking at the companies that you will submit to us, especially particularly in the pharma area. Now, one of the main changes from the past demo day is that we're accepting both startups and IP this time. So if you don't have a company but you believe you have an interesting technology that falls within the technology needs of Lilly, and also of other pharma groups that we have in the selection committee, you may submit either a startup or the IP. So the deadline for this is on July 14th for both submissions. Now, also, I'd like to remind everyone that we have another of these webinars coming up in the next few weeks. The next one is on June 26th. That's next week on Monday. Will be featuring PepsiCo. Now, if you have researchers that are working on food packaging, any related product that would relate to PepsiCo's business units, I do suggest that you sign up and you sign in for this webinar. And as you can see, we have a whole broadcast schedule up now. So on July 6th, we have Pfizer, then we have BASF. Eastman Chemical Company is coming up on July 13th. Then we have PrintPack on July 20th. On July 24th, we have GSK. Then on the 31st, we have Schlumberger. And this schedule will be updated when we have more broadcasts scheduled in the next few weeks. All right, so I think we now have the first question up. Let me do it now. And I'm gonna read it out, and you can answer them the best you can. All right. So from slide 6, I see university collaborations. How much activity does Lilly do with federal labs such as NIH?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I know very explicitly over the years we've had quite a few engagements with the NIH. There's NIH program funded to essentially take molecules that companies like ours have walked away from. They didn't necessarily hit their primary proof of concept in the kind of therapeutic area of interest that we were focused on, and academic professors, in fact, were in a position to provide alternative, essentially proposals to use those molecules, many of which have quite advanced packages to support, human clinical trials. And Lilly's been part of something, that's as late stage as that, but also very clearly in partnership over time with federal agencies such as the NIH. At the other spectrum, in fact, Lilly gave away our quality manual for biologic assay validation. I think this was our first big step in open innovation. The quality manual isn't necessarily secret sauce, but clearly to get that good and have really reproducible biological assays, Lilly felt it was imperative to give away all that good knowledge. And so now, today, the guidance that the NIH provides to the national screening centers and anybody interested is essentially how do you ensure that you have a valid assay. In some ways, it was self-serving for a company like us. All of that public domain information that gets generated by the universities is, in fact, searchable by us. And so in a self-serving way, knowing that those professors and teams followed a thorough validation process, you can take some good faith then in the data that you're reviewing for data mining. So there are collaborations that range the gamut. In fact, I know we've engaged the NIH in using our automated synthesis lab, which is a novel feature in our open innovation drug discovery program. I hope that answers. They're very focused on the NIH, certainly, but there have certainly been a number of other institutes and national labs that Lilly's worked with over time.
All right, thank you, Mike. So our next question is, does Lilly provide mentoring and or funding to startups?
Indirectly, the funding might come from our own Lilly Ventures groups. That's Lilly Asia Ventures and Lilly Ventures, both of which you can probably Google and find fairly quickly. There are a number of other strategic partnerships with venture capital companies, such as the Accelerator that runs out of Seattle and New York City, Epiderics, which runs out of the UK, and a number of others that you can see if you just Google Lilly and venture capital. A lot of those behind the scenes involve senior leadership weighing in on perhaps non-confidential packages, or depending on the interest level, Lilly would be very directly engaged in the innovation and collaboration ourselves. Ultimately, I think these discussions, you could say, are in some ways shaping kinds of exercise. I think different individuals at Lilly certainly are connected to a number of startups, both in our geographies where we have R&D labs, but beyond. I don't believe we have any kind of a formal mentoring process or commitment or initiative. I think it's a great idea, but a number of colleagues that work with or work within our VC, they are naturally set up to be that kind of a person as well.
All right, thank you, Mike. Our next question is lined up now. How many startups does Lilly look at per year, and how many deals are actually done between Lilly and the startups per year?
That's a great question, and let me just say, what you see in the public domain is really iceberg level of information. A lot of things, collaborations, get done without having any obligation to report it. So what I can speak to are what are the kinds of deals that we do that are kind of the above water type of iceberg. Companies like ours are looking at between 4,000 and 5,000 opportunities a year. That ranges from things that are certainly on strategy, things where we are actually a competitor, and in fact, perhaps the innovators contacting us know full well we are. In other cases, they don't know, but usually this all starts with a non-confidential kinds of presentation. Frankly, in terms of number of deals per year, there are some statistics on the complicated slide that I shared earlier. Things change certainly as our portfolio strategies change from year to year. I would say, in an annual basis, there are well over 100 types of deals done. Many of these are with I wouldn't call them young startups, but startups where the innovation has advanced to a point where it fits within our portfolio, it supports a trade-off decision, or in fact, it's just the right technology at the right time. So it's a little hard to talk about what kinds of deals. We've signed, as well as a number of other companies that have an oncology portfolio, we've signed a number of collaborative deals, not only with big pharma, but other biotech players that have agents that would be complementary to our own either immuno-onc molecules or non-traditional oncology agents that are large molecules, for example. So I hope that answers the question sufficiently.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Here's our next question, and I think we have as of now we have about 5 questions lined up, so we have time, but I think more are coming in. So our next question is, what is the timeline from your interest in the startup to an exit? As an angel interested in investing in companies you are interested in, I need to know how many years my money will be tied up.
Well, wow. It's one of those billion-dollar questions. I think it all depends. We've seen companies that, and we're seeing these kinds of things that are we're calling them pre-web. So there are some companies that have cornered some aspect of know-how or innovation or IP, and they're clearly starting up or have started, but they don't even have a website yet. So this is a new phenomenon in the last couple of years. Some of these companies have already traded, frankly, to other pharma or other biotech that perhaps were willing to take a little more risk than we would on an average day. I think the important thing to understand is ultimately a company like Lilly doesn't have a lot of free cash lying around. We are, in fact, running a huge number of clinical studies. At one point, a few years ago, I had a colleague kind of highlight that we have a new clinical study start every day. Now, some clinical studies are just clinical pharmacology, biopharm studies that are necessary to go along with a phase 3 entity. Some are new indication line extension. Some are trials where we're supporting an investigator-sponsored trial, but we still need to be plugged in. So I think to get back to the nature of your question, I think the timing of an exit can be quite unpredictable, and classically, angel investors are probably investing at the most critical point of de-risking an innovation that might, in fact, be just double checking the initial results or doing the initial killer experiments to confirm that the opportunity could continue to move forward to a traditional Series A or even acquisition. I'm not sure I delivered too much useful information in that.
Yeah, but I think you answered the best you could. So that was a pretty tough question. I mean, all right. So I'll dig you out of that hole. I think this would be pretty. This is a pretty good question. Would Lilly be interested in working with graduate students who take IP out of the university and have an SBIR grant?
I think, frankly, that's a very, very unlikely scenario. And I've actually met some folks through the NCET2 process, right, that essentially fit this profile. Folks that are really entrepreneurial, maybe didn't find their dream job available right as they were finishing graduate school and saw an opportunity. And by the way, I think most graduate schools are kind of opening up this whole phenomenon of being able to take some business-related courses regarding entrepreneurialism. And certain ecosystems, like Boston, for example, even I've seen this at Ohio State and Case Western Reserve, people are actively doing this. I think, honestly, your best first bet is to be getting close to as many VC representatives and angel investors as you can. They see thousands of opportunities themselves and have a very good sense. If it's something that's not within their strategy, they're very well connected and probably can connect you. So while your first question might be, hey, are you interested in this? Flip it to, hey, do you know anybody that might be interested in this? You're going to get a very different level of engagement, right? It's probably easy for them to say no to the first question. It's a lot harder for them to just outright say no. They don't know anybody in their network that might be interested. So I would say your first list of people to network with are VC representatives. Even though they might not be investing at that period of time, they may be actually trying to raise money, so very busy. But they can point you to people that are involved, for example, with the bio organizations in your own neighborhoods. Those organizations are very well connected to other entrepreneurs that can be mentors or people that can help you get to your elevator pitch, which you're going to need. The other thing I would say is anybody that's thinking about this, you should go back and Google the last 3 years of bioentrepreneur, a little section that shows up in Nature Biotechnology every month, there's a wonder of very useful information for entrepreneurs in that. Every month there's a new topic. It's how to raise IP, cash, how to, what is the strategy for IP, how do you prepare an elevator speech. It's just an amazing set of resources, some of which is common sense, but I think it can help you perhaps think about this whole problem. Who do I got to find to work with?
Okay, thank you. Let me see. There is another question up here okay, here. I'll cue it up now. How valuable are enabling technologies, for example, packaging to keep medicines at appropriate temperatures for transport?
Yeah, this is a very difficult question, and certainly this kind of thing can be incredibly important for the price of managing a cold chain. For example, Lilly has some cold chain know-how, having delivered insulins to the market for better than 80 years, and really even today, your injectables typically have to be refrigerated, and when they're transported, there's a very complex mechanism to monitor have there been any temperature excursions. I don't know necessarily what kind of price differential what one can expect for those kinds of innovations. I'm certainly not as well versed in that area as others. I can tell you there's a whole ecosystem of innovation around anti-counterfeiting and packaging that in fact is more complex than you could imagine, especially for medicines that tend to get counterfeited. And you just wouldn't believe the amount of energy and focus that goes into those kinds of things. So it's a little off from the keeping things at temperature question, but on the other hand, this can be these kinds of things can be really important for zones on the planet where, in fact, high heat can really be a problem with maintaining the integrity of a drug we're intending to deliver safely.
Okay, thank you, Mike. I have a follow-up question from the SBIR question earlier, if you're still up to answering it. The follow-up is, are you saying that SBIR is not a good source, is not a good route, but rather use angel or VC funding?
Oh, no, not at all. I think one begets the other. I think people with the patience to go through either process effectively, you're getting feedback along the way. I think to get an SBIR grant or follow-on grant, it certainly doesn't happen overnight, and I think for some folks you can find it frustrating. Worst case, it sharpens your elevator speech. So I think this is clearly a very important path that the government is enabling, and I wouldn't sit here say that one's better than the other. In fact, probably to keep your innovation going, both are going to be needed, and both, if you have positive outcomes, are a signal that your innovation is perhaps meeting the bar of unmet medical need.
All right, thank you, Mike. Our next question is, does Lilly collaborate with academic institutions on TB projects? If yes, what are Lilly's need in TB?
That's a great question, and for several years, Lilly's made a huge investment in working to help shape the fight against TB. Lilly itself is not involved in any kind of commercial aspects. In fact, several years ago, I believe we traded away for free the rights on how to produce some medicines for third world countries where In fact, those medicines were perceived to be useful standard of care and affordable for those areas. A number of years, Lilly has contributed to kind of the whole ecosystem of institutions and small companies, in fact, that were attempting to deliver innovation to solve this very important problem. There is actually on our OIDD website some more information around Lilly's TB initiative. There were several years where we committed a large series of funds. That's, I think, going forward necessarily no longer the case. But that was all meant to, in fact, be helping to define new targets, new molecules and approaches that might be useful for drug-resistant TB.
Okay, thank you. I have another question. We have a couple more questions here before we wrap up. So here it is. Thanks for the talk. Can you give any indication of what level of results you need before considering an innovation collaboration? So for example, if I have a small molecule with some interesting in vitro results, is that enough, or would you want preclinical data in multiple animal models, etc.?
Well, again, it's probably the multi-million-dollar question, and I think companies like ours certainly it grabs a lot more attention the more in vivo data that you have. Molecules that are great tools in an assay format in vitro don't necessarily translate to utility or ability to confirm essentially a proof of concept in some preclinical animal model. Likewise, understanding a new target and what are the risk-benefit kind of challenges that you might have going forward is helpful. So ultimately, either an in vitro assay or an in-cell kind of assay, that's only part of the de-risking that has to happen when you throw the molecule in vivo and then demonstrate that you've met efficacy and you have no untoward effects. That certainly is all the more interesting. I think if you are working on a target that is really quite unique, not been described anywhere else, that's a good time certainly to engage, but the more data that you have that de-risks anyone's understanding of the complexity around risk-benefit, especially in a model that's really considered to be translationally relevant to the human situation, is huge. So I think, for some targets, it's very difficult to understand if you're going to be able to have an animal model that allows you to confirm. You might not have the right biomarker, or they might not have the right readout. So it's more complex than just saying you have a molecule that's engaging a target.
Okay, thank you, Mike. We have two more questions and then we'll wrap up. So we have a follow-up question to, I believe, the TB question earlier. What about new cancer vaccines? So same question.
Yeah, this is a great question, and this is very much an example of disruptive technology. If we had a vaccine really that could cure type 1 diabetes, well, that'd be hugely disruptive for a business like ours. Likewise, for anybody working in oncology, cancer vaccine has been the holy grail. This is something that companies like us are certainly paying attention to and looking at all the time. There's been huge breakthroughs in our understanding of the immunology associated with cancer, either protection or resolution. And so clearly this is a hot topic. So those kinds of things would certainly be of interest. Let me discriminate, though, very clearly. There are a certain number of areas where it's obvious Lilly's working. Years ago, we used to work in depression and schizophrenia. That's no longer the case. Our focus now is in neurodegenerative disease and pain. And that kind of is where you'd see from a public domain perspective where our portfolio investments are going. But ultimately, our search and evaluate team is charged with looking wider than just our own therapeutic area strategy and our own platform capabilities. So this clearly falls in the zone of responsibility to track with our search and evaluate colleagues.
All right, perfect. And our last question, as far as the global health part of Lilly's core values, how often do you work with third world country governments?
It's a great question, and Lilly, I think, products are marketed in, last figure I recall was well over 125 countries across the world. Certainly, getting innovation to patients, especially things like insulin, in an affordable manner are hugely important. And so I really can't speak to the level of detail that the question is probably trying to get to, but trying to deliver that innovation and the next generation of innovation to third world countries is a really big, I would say, challenge for the pharma industry, certainly. And therefore, there are a lot of activities going on, consortiums, et cetera, to try and resolve the issues that patients have in those areas.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike, for answering all our questions today. And of course, we'd like to thank you for joining us and taking the time to talk about your technology needs and broadcasting them to our audience of universities, entrepreneurs, as well as some federal labs that we have on board. But Mike, before we wrap up, do you have like a couple of words to impart before we before we close formally today?
Well, I would just say for those that are attending that are thinking about submitting their company or thinking about partnering with somebody who's going to submit their company as a startup proposal for the NCET2, I think that's an important process. Certainly, it's one way in which you can work to get input, in fact, on your proposal, your idea, your business model. Working with your startup officers or university tech transfer office, or in fact the ecosystem that might be close to you in the form of the bio organizations or angel investors or innovation centers that are now getting stood up in many areas across the United States. Networking as much as you possibly can. And taking all complementary approaches such as the NCET2, I would say, approach to get recognition, get your innovation noticed. Ultimately, there's an amazing set of innovations that are landing every day out there and being tested, and there's a real fight for resources, and I think the more you can think about it, the more input you can get on your proposals, your elevator speech. It can really allow you to take your passion in the right direction.
Okay, again, thank you very much, Mike, for joining us this afternoon, and thank you for those fantastic parting words. And with that, I'd like to remind everyone again that the deadline to submit for the demo day is on July 14th. So please, just go to our website. You can click on the links there to submit either a startup or IP or technology to be reviewed and scored by our corporate selection committee. And to remind everyone that our next webinar in this series is on Monday, June 26th at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific, featuring PepsiCo. So if you have researchers, students, faculty, if you're an entrepreneur that works in food, packaging, or any similar auxiliary technologies that PepsiCo might be interested in, I do suggest that you join the webinar on Monday and, to know more about what they're looking for. All right. So again, thank you everyone for joining us today. And thank you, Mike. And we hope you learned a lot today. And we're looking forward to seeing your submissions come in. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks, Rhea. Bye-bye.